Good morning. Thank you for giving us the opportunity, Cindy and I, the opportunity to present our research on the mediating effects of organizational socialization on the school-to-work transition. We want to start with this quote from Tim Hall, who is the father of the protean career. So talking about self-managed careers, the idea, a lot of the literature on self-managed careers pushes a lot of the emphasis to managing the career on the individual. Our argument here is there, as with what Hall is saying, is there's two sides to that, and the organization has a role in it. So that leads our research questions, looking specifically at the school-to-work transition of early careerists. What were their expectations? What factors mediate the school-to-work transition for these early careerists? And what can organizations do to facilitate a successful school-to-work transition for early careerists? So we're looking at a couple of different processes and populations in this study. First of all, looking at organizational socialization, which is this joint process that happens between the organization and the individual. The school-to-work transition, which of course is a unique point in time, both a organizational socialization and also a change in identity for the individual, as well as a period of developing skills. And then during that school-to-work transition, at least in most Western economies, it's happening in that emerging adulthood period. Again, a period of exploration and identity development where people are not only exploring issues of work, but also of their own personal love, life, and worldviews. And then we are looking specifically at a population of what we refer to as early careerists. And by that, we mean they've chosen, at least at this point, a particular professional career. They've made a commitment to that. And in this study, that happens to be healthcare administration. So our methods and data, we had a sample of 12 graduates from a single Bachelor of Science in Healthcare Administration program. So this is basically a undergraduate business degree that's focused on the healthcare industry. So these are young folks that are not clinical. They're looking to be managers in the healthcare space. We did a longitudinal qualitative study, 7 interviews over the course of 2 years, the first being prior to graduation, quarterly during the first year, and then twice during the second year. We analyzed the data using grounded theory, open and axial coding of all the transcripts, and then the co-authors developed kind of a key event timeline for each participant so we can compare the arcs of their experiences. From that data, we developed a 3-stage model looking at the anticipatory pre-school-to-work transition stage, the entry into the workforce, and the mediating variables. So the top bubbles are the organization's efforts, and then the bottom bubbles are the individual efforts. And then the third part is evaluating the effectiveness of the school-to-work transition, again, from the organization's perspective, the individual's perspective, and then where they share. So I'm going to talk about each of these, and I'll start by talking about the pre-school-to-work transition portion. So anticipatory socialization. These students were participating in an undergraduate program explicitly designed to help them transition into the field that they were going into. When they were interviewed, they talked about that they were looking for a major that would in fact lead to a career and develop skills that would allow them to launch a career. So I've got some quotes for each of these. I'm highlighting the because they're long, some of them are longer, I'm going to bold some portions of it, but basically you see here, I think the purpose of an undergraduate degree is to kind of find a major or some focus you really want to pursue as a career. So you're hearing them before they graduate, they're already talking about a career, not a first job, right? So they're careerists, not just looking for employment. Also, during that pre-graduation interview, we're talking about what does a successful career look like to you? And so they started to defining success. So they articulated a protean career orientation, which implies both subjective and objective success. So they're not just interested in making a lot of money. They want to be happy. They expressed a willingness to ask, do you expect to be with the same organization forever? No, absolutely not. I'm gonna move where the opportunities are. So that's a boundaryless career orientation. They expressed a sense, again, of having the beginning of a career very focused on values of autonomy, responsibility, and growth. So here you see a representative quote. Success is how far you make it up a company's ladder, but also if you're happy with what you did. It's more important for you to be happy with yourself and what you've done than for somebody looking at from the outside. So there's this internal protean kind of look. So moving on to the mediating variables. starting with the organization's perspective, what are the formal steps that the organization is doing to help onboard and bring and integrate the individual? Most of the respondents felt the organization didn't do a great job. They felt that, particularly at the organization level, the organizational orientation. So here is a representative quote. This young lady went to work at a hospital in the Department of Pediatrics. She went to the hospital orientation and felt it had very little bearing on her department because her department functioned very differently than what the rest of the organization looked like. So that was a common response. But we had some very positive work unit level orientation stories. So this young lady talked about how they had her shadow each position in her work unit, and she felt very, very welcomed. And then her supervisor tried to place her in a role that she and the supervisor agreed was a good fit for her. We also look at perceived organizational support, and perceived organizational support breaks out into perceived supervisor support and perceived peer support. So from a supervisor perspective, of the 12, most reported either kind of moderate sense of support from their supervisor or frankly low support. Most of them reported the supervisors were very busy, didn't have time for them. They didn't feel like they could ask too many questions. And in some cases, they were physically distant. The supervisor operated on a different floor, so they were physically far away, or the supervisors were very busy. One of the things that surprised us was the amount of supervisor turnover. And we had one individual with 5 supervisors over the course of 2 years. On average, there were at least 2 supervisors. At least 3 supervisors. 3 was the median. Only 2 of the 12 had the same supervisor for 2 years. So here's a quote that talks about the relationship between the supervisor. The participant observed the supervisor was too busy, wasn't engaged with her, wasn't trying to mentor her and help her build up. An opposing experience. I'm lucky to have a director that was so accessible to me, so willing to help out with my development. I think she makes it a priority, and that's part of what makes our team so strong. So there's, this basic leadership there, but it wasn't as common as you would expect, right? So this was kind of the exception rather than the rule. The first one was more common. Looking at it from the peer side, most of the participants reported very positive peer experience, which is consistent with the literature. So here's a representative quote from this gentleman. He's talking about a gentleman named Mick who helped him learn kind of the ropes of his job. So he basically taught me everything that I know. Another factor that caught us a little bit by surprise, but it's consistent with the emerging adult portion, was the importance of them being placed in organizations where they had peers who were near their age and life stage. So this gentleman went to work in an organization that had a younger kind of average age, a lot of people in that early emerging adult stage. And he talked about, since I've gotten out of school, I feel like everything's changed. In his first year, he lost his father and his grandfather. He moved out of his house. He did a whole lot of those emerging adult things. And, one of the things that really bound him to his organization was the fact that many of his colleagues came to his father's funeral. He talked about how important that was to him. So the importance of this peer support is not just, particularly for these young emerging adults, is not just learning the job, but it's also helping them move through those emerging adult tasks that they're trying to accomplish. So that was the organization side. On the individual side, proactive socialization. This is the efforts by the employee to learn the role and to fit in and understand the organization. And this is a skill that was clearly learned over time. So here is a quote from the pre-graduation interview with a young lady, and I was asking her, what do you think about mentorship? Is that going to be important to you? She's like, definitely, I think it's going to be important. I don't know how to get to be a manager, but I don't know how to go about getting a mentor. So this is a skill, right? We all have been to multiple organizations. You know how to get into the organization. You know how to find out the information. She's saying, I don't actually know how to do that. And that's part of proactive socialization as a skill. Here is a quote from a final interview with another participant talking about this individual had 4 supervisors over the course of 2 years. And so what he refers to here, he had a lot of frustration with that because he felt like he had to keep learning his job. He got reorganized twice and he kept having a different supervisor. So he had to keep relearning his job. But at the end of it, he says, this has actually been a really great growth opportunity for me. I have learned how to manage my relationship with supervisors. And so that's an example of having learned this skill of proactive socialization. Mentorship is kind of that, what we identify as mentorship is that overlap in that mediating space, because it's both an individual and a organizational responsibility to find the mentor, make that mentorship work. Cram talks about mentorship being job coaching and psychosocial support. So most participants didn't report their supervisor as their mentor. Some did, but I would say of the 12, most did not. And then most participants didn't report what we typically think of as that classic mentor is this one person that does everything for you. Didn't find that. It was kind of a distributed, where it worked well, it was kind of distributed, and we had what we refer to as a culture of mentorship. We did have a few really great mentors. This gentleman, Brian, mentored two, is not his real name, mentored two of the participants. They were in the same organization. And you can see here, he shares a lot of his learning experiences with us. So that's job coaching. He's really open to helping us learn the psychosocial support elements. So moving from the mediating variables to measuring the outcomes, looking at objective success as the shared, both organizational and individual outcomes. First of all, of course, for the school to work transition, they want to be working, right? So everyone was employed, so that was a success. 10 out of the 12 had been promoted either in their organization or by moving between organizations. So promotion is a good measure of success because on both sides, obviously, the individual wants to be promoted. The organization is going to promote you if you are effectively socialized to the organization. 3 individuals changed organizations, and they were for 3 different reasons. One was the individual had a poor relationship with the supervisor. One recognized right away that the organization was a poor fit, and the third had left because she wanted to go to grad school. So, pursuing growth. So, rapid turnover is, of course, costly for both the employee and the employer. So looking at success from the organizational commitment side, what we really want when we socialize from the employer side, employers want to socialize an individual so that they're committed, they're internalizing the organization's interests, and we're measuring that in some degree by their intent to stay. So we have this final quote from one of the participants. When I asked him, would you stay in that organization do you see yourself being in that organization for 5 years? And his response was, my job is pretty damn good now. I could definitely see myself here in 5 years. I love my team, right? So that's a powerful, affective statement of intent to stay. It's clearly he's internalizing the interest of the organization. But one of the things that was interesting to see, of course, was it's possible to both have an intent to quit or develop an intent to quit and still be committed to the organization. And this is largely related to that protean pursuit of personal growth. And so 3 years, so again, would you see yourself there in 5 years? 3 years, probably. 5 years, getting pretty long. Kind of feel like after a while, they might outgrow the organization a little bit. So, so she was already starting to develop an intent to quit, but very happy with the organization, liked it a lot. We were also interested in, they had chosen this profession of healthcare management. Do they want to stay in healthcare? Are they committed to the industry? Most of them were still committed to the industry at the end of the period with a comment like, I can't see myself ever leaving healthcare management. Some of them recognized, I've got generalized skills. I've got management skills. I've got IT skills. I've got these other skills that I know can be moved across industries. And so they're saying, I don't feel obligated to stay in healthcare if another opportunity sparked my interest. So this was a smaller group. And then we had a couple at the end two individuals who had left the industry or were in the process of leaving the industry, one to go to law school and the other to go into data analytics. And she had actually just finished her analytics program and was moving to an online furniture retailer. So the one that was going to law school said, I never really had the itch for healthcare. So looking at the individual, so we looked at, because these are expressing themselves as protean, we want to know, did they achieve subjective success? And most of them responded with positive subjective evaluations. I'm very happy and I'm absolutely loving it. And, talking about fit. And so there's a professional growth kind of focus. The second one focuses on personal growth, right? I feel like I've grown so much, even to be honest with you, living in big city has made me a lot more aware. Right? These are, having to set a budget for myself. You learn a lot about yourself. This is all your adult or emerging adult functions, right? That they're processing through at the same time. Part of the Protean career perspective is this idea of developing adaptability, right? So this is a measure of success, and it's a key competence for the self-managed career. So you're supposed to, the 4 C's of control, concern, curiosity, and confidence. So really love this quote this came out at about the year mark from a young lady, said, I don't want to just wake up one day and be like, wow, I just kind of rolled through life. So here you see control, confidence to start to maybe take control of her career, and concern that, she doesn't want to miss something. And we had, this is from the last interview. This was a young lady whose arc with her organization started very high and kind of fell as she had a number of different supervisors and didn't get promoted, and for a variety of possible reasons. But she basically arrived at the end of that 2 years and had set in motion a plan to move across the country to experience something else. She was going to move to Texas and try a whole different life. And so there's an example of, control. So yes, things haven't worked out here, but I have the confidence that I can move on and do something else. So looking at the results of the model, specifically about the nature of early careerists, this was a kind of a final quote. Looking at fit, thinking about fit, she was commenting, I think the biggest problem with any graduating student is that it's scary going out into the real world, right? It's completely different when you're there full time. That is a emerging adult kind of statement in our mind. And this is an individual who had done an internship in the organization that she had gone to work full time in. So she had a good job preview, but that act of going full time was completely different in her mind, right? So early careerists making the school to work transition are different from other employees in our mind in two important ways. Number one is proactive socialization is a skill learned over time. It's not something you graduate college with. You're going to learn that by having to deal with lots of change at work. The second is, of course, what we've been talking about. They're dealing with adult development tasks throughout that process at the same time. So making that socialization to the organization just that much more complicated. And so the value of peer support. From the organizational side, we recognize that early careers aren't going to stay. So going back to that quote from Hall at the beginning, it's important for organizations, if they want to be regarded as excellent, they're going to need to be competitive, to be known as a good place for employees to grow. This idea of a culture of mentorship, it's just good leadership really, but it is really important for these early careerists and their needs. And then we wanted to focus on responsibility of the industry. Yes, we know they're going to leave, but if we're working in an industry, and we know these are early careerists for healthcare, they're going to bounce to another healthcare organization, but you're going to recruit from their people, right? So it's a public good. We had a few recommendations, and I'm running out of time, but basically design a structured orientation, so more structure to their orientation, particularly at the work unit level. Try to place them with at least near some emerging adults, because there's a clear organic psychosocial mentoring that goes on. Provide coaching, particularly on discerning the tasks of the job. Provide mentorship on their career and how they fit. So again, we recognize a lot of limitations here. Small n, even though we think what's unique about this study is the level of granularity that we got into with the 7 interviews over the course of 2 years. Yep, it's a single industry focus. So what we're looking at is developing a survey to see if we can validate the model. And then we're looking at following up with these individuals probably at the 5-year mark, which is about a year from now, actually. So thank you. And that's,
thank you very much.